Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, children, as well as babies, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Driveline Academy podcast. I'm your host, Devin Morgan, Director of Baseball at Driveline, founder of the Driveline Academy, and you're joining us on the world's most dangerous youth baseball podcast. First-time listeners, last-time listeners know that we're going to start every show with a little bit of housekeeping. We got a spicy episode for you today, so I'm going to try to get through the ad read stuff fast. Axbat.com, code DL20 will get you, your friends, your loved ones, your associates, 20% off from our good friends at Axbat.com for our stick and ball sport enthusiast training and game application tools. So we're talking about bats, and more bats. And all of that you can get at 20% off at Axbat.com using code DL20 for 20% off. And just to note, that's not like a hollow 20% off. Just to reiterate, that 20% off gets us 10% of your purchase that we put directly into our scholarship fund to help kids do this thing, train at Driveline for either no cost or reduced cost. So if you want to support that initiative, one of the ways you can do that is by going to axbat.com and use that code DL20 for 20% off. The other way that you can support the Academy right now, aside from training tools, would be our new merch. Unfortunately, no, my Japanese Stanley Kubrick shirt is not one of our merch drops. But if you go to drivelinebaseball.com/shop/youth, I think that's the URL. You could just also Google Driveline Academy shirts. Probably going to land on the Driveline website. You can see the three designs that we have for you this spring. The Warriors tee inspired by the movie The Warriors. The Shark Smell Blood tee inspired by a film about a very angry shark. And then the Casey Weathers Let It Rip tee inspired by the one and only Casey Weathers. This is our spring drop. We're probably going to do some more stuff in the summertime, assuming that these are received well. You guys are buying them so far. So if you want to represent the brand, you want to represent the idea, you want to represent kind of the things that we advocate for here at the Academy, definitely get one of those shirts, because once they're gone, they're gone. And actually, I need to go buy a couple for my dad. So once this is done, I'm going to go straight out that way, and I'm going to go talk to Astra. I'm going to grab some shirts. So they're going fast. You probably want to pick them up now. Beyond that, look, Youth Underload Smash Bat, Youth Power Bat, I've said it once and I'll say it again. These are the best tools you can buy to start a progressive, development-driven approach to increasing hitting skill for youth players. Just straight up, it's just the best money you can buy, and I would be saying that if I wasn't the one who designed and created them, but I was, so I am. Youth Underload Smash Bat is just like something that you should have in your bag. Even it's just like a bat that you have in the warm-up circle. I have got some guys who just sent some stuff in with some immediate good positive signal, albeit small sample, about adding the Youth Underload Smash Bat into a training session and then seeing bat speed with the game bat go up. There's some data-driven ideas about why that might happen relative to this concept of potentiation that we've probably talked about before and I've threatened getting into in detail. But suffice to say that it just works to swing a light thing that then primes your system to move something fast. Youth Power Bat, kind of the same deal, right? If you want to do bat speed training, you want to do that type of rotational strength development, and you want to do it in a way where you're not going to screw up your kid's swing, just buy the Power Bat, because it's just better than anything else on the market, specifically the Camwood Bat. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Again, I threatened that today's episode was going to be a spicy one. This is where we're going to start. I got nothing against the people or the folks that have bought them or use them, and I get it. But the problem is when you start to look at the swing weights, specifically when you start to look at things like MOI, it becomes very apparent right off the bat that the MOIs of training bats like the Camwood are unnecessarily heavy to the point that you're not driving kind of the ballistic rotational signal that you need to in order to increase bat speed. What does this mean without throwing out a bunch of $5 words? The bat's too flippin' heavy. And it's too flippin' heavy, and it has too high of a swing weight. So what happens is kids go to swing it, they don't have the strength to hold and rotate, so they dump the barrel super fast, and then they have an excessively positive attack angle trying to get the bat out of that position. This then ends us up in launch angle swing mode. John Smoltz is all upset at me, and I didn't even build that thing. That's not mine. My thing is different. So if you want to avoid that type of thing, you want to do bat speed training without creating these negative adaptations to your child's swing, whether you're a baseball player or a softball player, I'll just put that out too, right? Bat speed training isn't domain specific. There's no reason that every softball player in the country shouldn't have a power bat in their coach's bag. Bat speed is good. It is a thing that we can develop, and it doesn't need to develop differently for softball players than it does for baseball players, because bat speed is bat speed. Buy the power bat, swing it, bat speed's going to go up, comes with free training plans, etc. We done. I think we done. So I promised a little bit of spice today, and I will do my best to try to work through this topic. Best laid plans of mice and men, right? You know, we talked literally last week about this idea of, seeing your child be on the bump and having that feel very similar to like a shark attack, right? And on last week's episode, which I would suggest that you listen to, I mean, I have to, right? But I thought it was okay. What I tried to bring to this conversation was talking about that feeling, that emotionally vulnerable feeling that we have as parents, and talk through some of the intentionality we can bring to the exercise that kind of like subtly pushes us away from having that type of emotional reaction, because ultimately that type of emotional reaction probably doesn't suit us, and it definitely doesn't suit our children, right? So that was last week on Monday. On Wednesday, my son has the first of two back-to-backs against like our rival school. Wednesday's game goes great. Run ruled him. It's whatever. We then have the second half of that back-to-back on Friday at their place. And I knew that my kid was probably going to pitch, depending on how it went. So really tight, well-played baseball game. Like throughout. And I think, both the kids on those teams, on both teams, played their guts out, and it was generally really well played and well executed, and all that stuff was good. And look, man, I know a bunch of kids on both teams, because some of them I coached in Little League, some of them I coached in juniors maybe, or some of them might have been on an academy team. Like, I know a bunch of these kids. And that part is still cool to me, to see kids that I knew when they were teeny tiny, and now they're taller than me, and they're still playing the game. Like, that still makes my heart feel very full. And look, I've talked before about trying to navigate this space specifically. Like, how do I make sure that I can tell stories and advance this conversation about a different approach to youth baseball, and one that I believe to be more not only developmentally beneficial, but emotionally beneficial for coaches and players and parents. And in doing so, I'm trying to maintain a little bit of a protective veil, I suppose, that differentiates my experience as a parent with my child's experience. And that's challenging. It's sometimes. But again, my wife and I have had great conversations about like how to try to do that effectively. I've had conversations with my own kids about how to do that effectively. But it is interesting though, like when the rubber meets the road, like how that stuff goes. So first 4 2/3 of the game, we have Senior on the mound. He's pitching his guts out. Really good energy, great competitiveness, everything you'd want to see from like a senior leader. And then my kid comes in to close, right? To close out and probably carry this last, 2 and a third to get us out. And when the senior's on the bump, there's like some typical chirps that you'd hear from the dugouts, right? And like, it's high school baseball, man. I think chirping is just kind of implicit in the endeavor, and that's fine. I think you can even go so far as to make the argument that like you need to get accustomed to that type of stuff happening in competition in high school, because it's definitely going to happen in college. We can talk about the reasons why, but that's fine. I just point blank period. I got nothing against that type of stuff. But then my kid hits the bump, and the tone of it changes. The tone of it changes in a way that it starts to get a lot more personal. And I'll be honest with you guys, again, trapped in this room, it's just you, me, and some cameras. This is something that I've feared, and I do mean feared, for probably as long as I've been doing this. You know, like I'm self-aware enough to understand that, like, some aspects of my job push me towards being like an aggressively online person. And because my son specifically is still playing the game, that, you know, again, I'm trying to do my job, which is communicate to you guys and communicate everything I've learned in this process of devoting my entire professional life to youth and amateur baseball over the course of the last 14 years or whatever it is at this point. 50, I don't know. I mean, enough time that, like, I'm going to be able to throw a rock and say that I've been doing this for 20 years pretty soon. I'm trying to make sure that I can do my job, but, like, I don't put a target on my kid's back. And this is something that, like, I have to admit that I've been very worried about, because I know how hard the game is, right? And I know how hard the game is for everyone. And the last thing that I want to do as a parent is to add additional pressure to my kid's experience. And I'll even go so far as to say that I'm not sure that I've done a perfect job of that throughout this experience, but I'm definitely trying to learn from the moments in which I haven't done a perfect job of it. But more recently, I think as my son has continued to play the game, I have become acutely aware of, like, some of the potential ramifications of the fact that, like, his dad is again, like, I'm aggressively online. And I'm aggressively online because I want more people to understand what we do specifically with the Academy and at Driveline. I want more people to understand the developmental and emotional benefits of taking this approach to youth baseball. And while I'm doing all of those things, I'm also trying to deliver that same experience to a person that my wife and I made. We met in a bar. We fell in love. We got married. We made a couple people. Both of those kids played baseball at one point, and my son still does. So I am trying to deliver the same thing that I am talking about to you. And I didn't ever want to make it more difficult for him than it needed to be. So my kid hits the bump, and again, like, the tone shifted. And it's not, hey, we're just going to yell, you know, stupid stuff in the dugout and mostly try to make our people, you know, the other guys in the dugout, like, laugh. It's not that. It becomes personal, and you start saying somebody's name. And you start talking about their social media, and you start talking about throwing expletives out in my son's direction. And it was funny to me, because literally 1 week ago, sitting in this chair, I'm talking to you guys about trying to bring intentionality to the behavior that we exhibit as parents and how we receive our children's sporting experience, right? And then less than a week later, I am in the stands listening to some people not only try to chirp at my kid in a way that is totally expected, but also go one step further. And number one, it's funny to me that you would do that to a sophomore and not do it to a senior. Because I suspect that you're telling on yourself a little bit. I suspect that you are kind of suggesting that, like, I don't think I can rattle that kid because he's an 18-year-old. He's going to go play college baseball. He's been around this thing for a while. But, like, I do think we can do it to that one. And maybe you're also saying, I think we can do that because I think we need an edge, because I'm not sure that we can compete without doing that. Again, I'm just trying to understand the incentive of, like, why that would occur. And I'm simultaneously doing the math about, like, is this my fault, right? Did I, by virtue of being the director of baseball at Driveline and having a kid that continues to play baseball at Driveline, trained with Driveline methodology, did I put a target on his back, right? And I think in in reflection, I don't think that's necessarily what it was. But that doesn't make it any better, right? That doesn't make it any better. All that just means is that you've got people who are, again, that ain't chirping, you know, like that's a different thing. It's a different thing when you're not just chirping the outcome, or, you know, look, man, one of my favorite things last year is like pitcher picks to one, right? And like it's one of those like non-intentional pick plays, right? And this is last summer when I was coaching R18s a little bit, and some of the kids in the dugout, never twice. And then inevitably, like they're doing it loud enough so that they want the pitcher to hear, because they want to see how the pitcher's going to respond. And the tricky part is like as a competitor, you're going to respond to that, and then you're going to pick over again, even if you don't really want to, but you're going to do it because you kind of have to, right? But then the moment that happens, what are my kids in the dugout going to go? Never three times. And you see how this just like snowball rolls downhill, right? Again, it's not that, right? That type of chirping, give and take is fine. That's in the game or whatever. I think it's a different thing when you have kids getting called out their name, when you have expletives getting thrown in a kid's direction that are loud enough that not only that I can hear it on the other side of the field, right? The stands aren't like visitors home. It's home across the diamond, visitors. And if that stuff comes from a dugout, that's one thing. I think the thing about chirping is that, like, if you're going to give it, you have to be able to take it. And inherently, if it's coming from the competitors that are going back and forth at each other, then both of them still have the same opportunity to, like, be confronted with the resolution of that chirp, right? Hey, like if you're in the lineup, right, and you're chirping the guy on the bump, well, look, man, your spot's going to come around like 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 or whatever, and then you guys get to meet on the competitive field and resolve that, right? You popped off, you said some slick stuff. Well, now it's your moment in the sun, right? That's one thing. When it's kids not in the game, or when it's kids who don't even play, that are true spectators, man, that's soft. It's so unbelievably soft. It's so soft because you don't have anything at stake, right? And look, we understand the conception of high school baseball. More often than not, if you want to be on a team, you can find a way to be on a team. On a high school baseball team, right? There are some schools where they're going to have a disproportionate percentage of tryouts relative to the amount of coaches that they have, relative to the amount of roster spots that they have because of the amount of coaches they have. That's one thing. This wasn't exactly that. So it's hard to not feel some type of way when this type of disrespectful crowd participation is levied at competitors by people who are too soft to compete. That to me is like a, look, we've all seen the meme of like, it's like 340 AD and there's some castigation from some philosopher that like kids these days are so soft. And then you see it from like, the Middle Ages. The youth of this country are lost. And then you see it from like the 1920s, and you see this from the 1950s and the 1980s, and now here I am in 2025, kind of like ostensibly putting my generation or the generation that I grew up with on a pedestal and saying that we would never do that. And I'm sure that that's not true. But I've seen enough of like those prospect videos where you've got like high school kids that are going to get drafted, or they're high level Division I commits, and they get chirped by, I don't want to say the word fan, because I think if you're a fan of the game, you don't behave that way. At high school baseball, you want to chirp Juan Soto, go ahead, right? Hopefully all of us saw the clip where, some, I was going to let it fly. I promise spice, but I will keep it peachy. When some doofus is in the outfield at like a spring training game and he's barking at Juan Soto, and then Juan Soto literally like hits a homer that's like dead in his chest. You want to chirp a pro, like, fine, go ahead. Not my bag. I think the Uncle Rico, the whiffs of Uncle Rico about that type of behavior are so pervasive and strong that I personally would be ashamed to behave that way. But I accept that it also comes with the territory in professional baseball. High school baseball, different animal. Different animal, because, like, look, the doofus that's chirping Juan Soto couldn't make a team if he bought it. Kid in the high school stands disrespectfully calling out a kid in the middle of competition. Tomato, potato, man, those two circumstances and situations are not the same. And it is striking the amount of softness that is involved when you are actively behaving that way towards a competitor and you don't have the stones to put on a cap and a belt and put it on the line yourself. Unmitigatedly soft. Charmin tissue, soft. Teddy Ruxpin, soft. Fabric softener, soft. Because you don't have anything at risk. You got no stakes and you got no stones, so all you can do is sit your punk ass on the side and talk. So anyways, bottom six comes around and my kid strikes out the side. And in the bottom six, that's when this type of talk, this disrespectful talk, really hit its peak. And punchy. And my kid let him know. He stood on business in the parlance of our times. And look, I'm aware that there's a couple different ways you can respond to this type of stuff, right? You can do the one thing where you just like, you're a stone cold killer about it, and like there is no reaction. And I suppose that's one thing, and I suppose that's a choice. I think the other choice is just as valid. I really do. There's some very basic, like, we've seen the Kings of Comedy, original Kings of Comedy. Bernie, Cedric, DL, like that we saw that. Steve Harvey is the host, right? We saw that, right? Well, if you didn't, go back and watch Cedric's video. It's the wish principle. I wish you would. Because then when you chirp and I punch out three of your guys, I don't have a problem letting you know. I have no problem whatsoever. And I guess the thing that like struck me is I'm sitting there watching this whole thing happen. And like, number one, it's not about me, right? It's not about me. And I will admit freely that situation was probably the most like shark attack adjacent feeling that I've had watching my kid pitch in a long time. Truly. Not only because of the circumstance, just relative to like between the actual lines, but also because the vitriol that was thrown his way. And it made my heart very full to see him not only like do the job, but let them know. I will confess, however. So I got the game stream going on one thing, and because I'm a control freak, I had my Pocket Radar and that video running on another. And I turned the Pocket Radar video off at each half inning so that I'm not getting video on other kids or whatever. Or not pulling velos either. I will admit that as I went over to turn off my video at the half inning, I might have suggested that they should just keep talking. I might have thrown a shot. Didn't walk over there. Didn't point anybody out. Didn't walk over there. Talk to the head coach. Didn't go to try to find their AD. Didn't talk to the umpires because it is what it is. And I'll be honest. I think there's a part of me that even worries about talking about this on the pod because I'm sure that somebody can clip this out and construct this into something other than where we are with it right now, which is like, I'm so glad that it happened. I'm so glad that it happened. But I might have let them know just a touch. Again, closer to the shark attack that we've been in a long time. But I will say that, like, it, in my head, in that moment, all I'm doing is like rewinding the tape on the stuff that I'm talking about here and trying to make sure that the majority of my behavior and the majority of my decisions are in consideration of the same things that I advocate for. So yes, I might have fired off a singular keep talking that in their general direction, but it didn't escalate from there. We get to bottom 7. Some stuff happens. It goes a little bit sideways. We didn't end up getting the outcome that we wanted. And I'm still so glad that it happened. And I'm so glad that it happened exactly the way that it did. Because I think there's this thing in baseball where, look, the only experience that I have is the one that I am going through right now. And I kind of like mentioned this a little bit on the pod last week. If you are a parent who's got kids that are like, let's say, 13 or younger, and you're going through this experience, and it's just very much like hey, baseball is just like a thing that they do. And, there's some periods of time or seasons where it might occupy a disproportionate percentage of our family's time, but then we also go camping and we play basketball and we play soccer and whatever. Like, if that's the type of experience you're having, that's great. Like that's totally great. I think the experience that we've had is, if I'm telling the truth, that since my kids were pretty young, they wanted to do this thing at the highest level that they could, and they took it very seriously. So while I understand that there are different family configurations where, baseball is treated much less of like a life or death thing, that experience is not mine. That experience is not my experience. So when you consider that, right, it's interesting that our game, like when you're a young kid, there is, it's like you earn the right. You can earn the right to have all this responsibility kind of placed on your shoulders, which is kind of a little bit of a weird thing, right? And I think it's something that is very explicit because of the configuration of baseball as a game, right? Both my kids played soccer. And in so much as it matters, both of them were, how can I say this without sounding like a douche? Productive soccer players, right? Like, made stuff happen. But there was plenty of positive stuff that happened while they were on the field that they felt good about, that they didn't really have anything like directly, their participation wasn't directly resolved in like in a goal scoring opportunity, right? And there is kind of like this transitive property of accomplishment that you can have as a player in a game like that, where you're a player on this field in this constantly malleable mass of human beings, where it's like the give and take, moving around the field, moving the ball around the field, trying to set stuff up, etc. Baseball doesn't necessarily function like that all the time. Baseball functions in a way where the spotlight is very bright and very acutely focused on the person who initiates that action and the person who receives that initiated action, the pitcher and the batter, pitcher-batter, right? A lot of it revolves around those two characters, and it's a very, very bright spotlight. And the thing that can happen is that rather than kind of this transitive property of accomplishment where you're somewhere in the ether and some good stuff happens, and therefore like you feel participant, or you feel some amount of transitive accomplishment because you were there. Baseball ends up being a series of like individual component matchups, which then sprinkle in the team stuff alongside, right? But if you think about it, right, there's many more matchups in the game of baseball that are dominated by the inputs of the pitcher and the batter, as opposed to double cut situations, right? 5-6-3s, like a check 3 go 1 type of deal. There's a lot more individuality to our sport than there is this transitive thing. And the interesting thing about baseball is that when you're young and when you're good, especially on the pitching side, you do kind of earn the right to then have an accelerated amount of responsibility sometimes be dumped on you. And to quote Pusha T, as I do often, how will you respond? What would Meek do? I'm probably going too deep on you guys. Point being that when you get this kind of additional responsibility dumped on you, it is kind of an interesting question often of like, how are you going to handle it? Like a kid trying to close out a game. How will you respond? Batter coming up in a runners on second and third, none dead, chasing 2, bottom 7. How will you respond? Like the game will find you, number one. But number two, I think when you're young and when you show some amount of capacity or promise, you kind of like earn the responsibility and earn the capacity to fail at like a greater degree. Like that's the thing that we've chosen, right? It's the thing that we want. And because of that, and because it's baseball, we also understand that like not all of those opportunities and outcomes are going to go the way that we want. The question becomes, what do you learn from them? And how do you maximize that learning so that the next opportunity you get is informed by that thing? And you can kind of go into that next opportunity with more confidence and more sense of belief and conviction. That's why I'm so happy about what happened. I had 2 conversations with my kid afterwards, one of which had to do with his approach to the last batter that he saw, and something that he realized after the fact that, well, I'm just not going to give away here, because again, that's his story, not mine. But when he said that to me, boy, I was like, you found it, dude. Like you found it, because again, the outcome didn't go the way that he wanted or the way that our team wanted. So we ended up losing that game by 1. So we take a 1-1 split on them in the season, right? 1-1 rule victory for us, 1 very close played game for them. Kudos to both teams. It's great. It's fine. I know that my son's baseball career, he doesn't want to end at high school. So inherently, the question that we're able to kind of reframe this thing is it like, well, what are you going to take away from it? And there's one thing specifically about the way that he approached the last at bat that I was like, he unlocked something, and that is valuable, and it's a way to find value. Exactly what we were talking about last week. How are we receptive in learning to the learning opportunities that present themselves when we can kind of understand that like there's something we could have done different and it could have changed the outcome? If you treat the whole thing like a hot stove and you never go back to touch it again, what's the way to kind of explain this analogy, right? It's like if you're looking at a burner and you're assuming that the burner temperature is always set to 10 because you got burned once. Well, guess what? There's a bunch of other numbers on that dial. And when you have that perspective, you can kind of take from it, well, hey, now we took some value out of this thing that is going to basically positively color the rest of the experiences we're going to have in the future. And certainly we're going to learn from those too. But I was so flippin' proud of my kid for him to be able to have that type of awareness. That was one thing. The other thing, a couple days later in the car, he goes, how do you think I'm going to do in my next pitching outing? He was like, I can't remember exactly what he said. It was something tantamount to like, what would you bet on my next one? About how that one was going to go. And I said, son, I bet all the money I got. Every dollar I got. That you have now gotten this opportunity to like walk through that fire in that very, very specific thing, whereas a young ball player who earned the opportunity to have more additional responsibility dumped on their shoulders, that you, whether it went the way that you wanted it to or not, that's kind of immaterial. But you understood that you can get through that experience. And you didn't crumble. You didn't let all this negative, embarrassing, like truly, truly embarrassing behavior that should shame people. He was the target of it, and he didn't let it affect him. So proud. So proud. So it's I don't know, man, like I'm not trying to like Tony Robbins this thing, but like it's a gift. It truly is a gift if you frame it the right way. If you get really targeted and ruthless about extracting value, of which there is a ton, for how this stuff goes. So both things would be true, right? If I had, look, my daughter doesn't play baseball anymore. If I had heard say those type of things to an opposing player in the middle of competition and she's not in the field and she's not even in the dugout, I would personally be embarrassed. And that's me, right? That's just relative to the things that I value and the character that I believe that we have raised our children with, and the way that we present ourselves, the way that we approach competition. And I think we try to do so in as much of an honorable capacity as possible. I want to cut your head off. Do it in an honorable fashion. I want to stomp you into the mud, but I'll approach it with honor. That type of behavior. Again, this isn't just chirping, and those aren't fans. We've passed the proverbial Rubicon. But I'm glad that it happened. I'm so glad. Because in the aftermath, we're able to kind of extract this value and be able to say, look, you're going to go through that experience again. You know, if you continue to work and you continue to get better and you continue to be afforded these type of opportunities, it's going to happen again. But it won't be the first time now. Because it happened to you when you were a sophomore. I mean, you got to love that. You got to love that. I got to go for another meeting in 10 minutes, so we're going to just talk about one thing and one thing only. We did start the This Week's in Pitch Counts initiative, and I'm going to use this podcast to talk about this stuff a little bit more in depth. But if you want to, you can find this week's post on my social at Devin Morgan on X. You're going to find it at the Driveline Youth on our Instagram and Driveline Youth on Facebook. And again, appeal that if you've got 5 to 30 seconds, hit us with the likes, hit us with the all the reposts that you can, because the more that we can amplify this message out into the world, the better that we are. So if this is a thing that you dig on, man, like try to do those things. It would be greatly appreciated. Anyways, so this week's in pitch count, we did start with in an unexpected place, because what I could have started with was a 9-year-old who threw 102 pitches, over 2 2/3 innings, had 20 earned runs hung on them, but I'm not. And like, that's bad enough as it is, right? This is a direct violation of even the current pitch smart standard, which we believe needs to be revised, but I digress. That's just horrific management. Like, are you awake? Are you conscious? You are going to let a kid hang out there for 20? 20 earned, by the way. That's horrible. That's horrible. And to be very clear, we need to understand that that's a specific type of horrible coaching behavior that is directly related to the incentive structure of tournament baseball. I'm assuming that this kid probably had a decent amount of runs hung on them early. So it's like, look, we're going to get run ruled anyways. If I burn more of my limited pitching relative to the concentrated amount of games I have to play in a very short timeline, I'm only going to make our team less competitive in those games. So, E-caps, number 2, surprise, you get to wear it for $1.02. That's reprehensible in and of itself, but that's not where we're going to start, because we're going to start instead with the issue of overload on the chronic workload side. So we have this kid, Henry. First game of the year, kid goes out and throws 81 pitches in 34-degree weather. Game 1. Again, this is 10U, so it's 9-year-olds playing 10. That's pretty not great from an acute workload standpoint, meaning that I highly doubt that that kid was consistently throwing 80-pitch pens at a competitive level of intent leading up into that game. That's unlikely. So what we would look at, what we'd expect from like looking at the data, if this kid had a pulse sensor on, what you would see is an excessive amount of acute workload, right? Because if it's 81 pitches on the bump over, let's say it's 6, right? Over 6. Throw in the warm-up pitches there too. Throw on the pregame, catch play, etc. This is very easily like a 200 throw game. And that's just one game over the course of this weekend. Unless your practices consistently involve not only that volume of throwing, but also that volume of pitching at a competitive level of intent, along with that volume of throwing, the odds that this kid was set up in a way that they were progressively built up to tolerate this type of acute, meaning single-day workload, very, very low. But here's where it gets worse. What happens the next weekend? Well, the next weekend, Henry goes for 91. And this is a great performance, right? 6 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, 1 earned, 3 walks, 10 punchies. This is a kid that you would look at 10 years old and say, we got something here. We got something here. And we should want, and everybody in the ecosystem should want that kid to pitch for as long as they can. Because something's going right. I mean, unless the opposing team was very bad. But again, 3 walks, 10 punchies, man. Like, that's a great ratio. A lot of good stuff to take away here. But the issue is the chronic workload. Because now when we have high usage one weekend that probably blew out as acute workload, high usage the following weekend, and we start moving into that pattern, well, guess what, man? The end of that road is repetitive stress injuries, right? Little league elbow and little league shoulder. Because we understand that the very, very basic loop is as fatigue goes up, kinetics and kinematic changes happen. We say delays, decreased performance at a delay, right? Meaning that like as the fatigue goes up, performance starts to go down because the mechanical consistency and execution and sequencing goes down, and now we're opening up an exceptionally high risk of injury. And in 2 weekends, we've had a 10-year-old who's on that path. And look, I take no pleasure in bringing this up. I would prefer that this wasn't an issue, but the point of this initiative this week's in pitch count, you guys sending in box scores to me using my platform to talk about them. The point of this whole thing is to communicate to the folks who are listening. I know you're listening. And who have the capacity and are actually actively considering what action they can take right now to understand two things. The scale of how bad this is. Because look, if it's not for me talking about it, this is just a box score that just disappears into the ether. So number one, the scale. And in 1 week of putting out this solicitation for you guys to send me pitch counts, which you can send to me at Devin Morgan on socials, you can send to at Driveline Youth on socials, you can DM it to me if you want to be anonymous. I don't care, anything that works. But the point of this is to basically raise awareness of the scale and scope of this issue. Because I'm pretty flippin' convicted that if it's really existing at this type of scale and scope, that I can put it out a 1 week cattle call for messages and I get 15 responses, the overwhelming majority of which are absolutely terrible in this exact same regard, then that's, I don't know, is it 1/100th of the market? Look, man, I got a little under 10K followers on Twitter. So it's the place that I have the largest reach. Driveline has 50,000 or whatever. We're big, but like there's a lot more people out there who I suspect, because the system doesn't control their behavior, are acting this way because they can. And we don't even know about it. And that's a problem, because if we have a generation of ball players that are getting overused, and a generation of ball players who, because of habitual behavior and choices like this by adults, are pushed towards an overuse place that is going to compromise their health and longevity in this game, we're setting fire to flipping crops, man. We're burning it out. For what? Who profits? Well, the guys that make those plastic, shiny metallic silver rings definitely do. I don't think the kid profits. I don't think our game profits. That's why we need systems and structure in place to control this type of behavior. That's what we're trying to build towards with universal pitch counts, universal reporting. And I'm going to keep banging that proverbial gong until we have some very positive movement and some structural movement that puts people in charge of having to help build, define, execute, and implement this type of system. I have to get to my manager meeting in 2 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Again, if you want to participate in this week's pitch counts, send me in box scores. If you can just give me the box score and the age of the kid, that's really all I need. If you want to give me additional context other than that, that's great. You want to follow us on socials, at Driveline Youth, at Driveline Youth, at Driveline Youth. It would be really, really appreciated if we can continue to get more followers and amplify this type of message, because, again, that's the signal that we need to send to the folks that are in charge and are starting to consider what type of action steps that they could take. I don't know, typical stuff. Axbat.com, code DL20 will get you 20% off. Other than that, man, it's been a great week of baseball. I am very excited for what the spring and the summer looks like. I hope you guys are getting through it and get your seasons off to a good start. I'll probably do a call for questions next week about some in-game stuff that you might be thinking about, because I think that's a good conversation for us to have. And other than that, that's all I got. I am Devin. I am done by law. I'll catch you next time. Thanks, bye.